often. It's important that your feedback be delivered in a way that the other person can really hear, consider, and act on. And that doesn't just magically happen. For most of us, giving effective feedback requires us to experiment, practice, and yes, get feedback on our feedback. Of course, while no two people are identical in how they give or receive feedback, there are some helpful best practices that you should consider to help you make sure that your feedback truly helps someone develop, grow, and succeed. Helpful feedback follows 5 C's: contextual, conversational, clear, caring, and culturally aware. Download the attached worksheet to help you follow along and evaluate your skills. Let's start at the first C, contextual. Be clear about why you are giving the feedback. What's your intention and goal? Be upfront about why you're giving it now. Ideally, you're delivering the feedback now because it's timely, close to when you observed a behavior in action, and close to when the next opportunity to improve will occur. And if you're not sharing the feedback close in time to when you see someone in action, explain why. Let the person know how this feedback fits into the bigger picture of the project, the team, the client, the company, and even their career. Put the feedback in context of what should be different next time. Make the feedback feed forward, as author and leadership coach Marshall Goldsmith says. Focus on the future more than the past. Conversational. Make it a dialogue, not a monologue. Tell them that you see this as a conversation, and then remember to stop talking and ask them to contribute their ideas and perspective. Be mindful of your verbal, vocal, and visual communication. Being conversational includes using easily understood language and simple terms. It involves speaking in a tone of voice that conveys both professionalism and personal care. It includes using body language that is open and inviting. Remember that you only know the part of the conversation or story that you have in your head. Acknowledge aloud that you're open to their perspective, point of view, and position. Clear. Be specific about what behavior you're observing and make sure that you don't confuse a behavior with an interpretation of that behavior. For example, unprofessional is an interpretation. It could mean just about anything. Compare unprofessional with doesn't respond to emails within 1 business day or interrupts people in meetings, which are both behaviors. Be straightforward about what you're requesting the other person do differently. Communicate more is not likely to lead to a specific improvement. Email me a project update status each Friday is easier to understand and take action on. Offer concrete ideas and strategies to bridge the gap between the current behavior and the one you're looking for. Now, that doesn't mean that your employees shouldn't make their own suggestions. They should. However, you should also come prepared with clear tactics that you can contribute to the conversation. Caring. There's often a gap between our intention and our impact, which is one of the things that makes feedback hard. Check in during the conversation to see whether your message is coming across the way you intend. And if not, stop talking and address the gap before you continue giving feedback. Show that you care about the person and not just their performance. Pause the feedback to ask them how they're feeling and address it directly. You don't have to fix how they feel, but you should acknowledge their emotions. Ask about what else may be going on for them in work and life that could be impacting their performance directly or indirectly. When people feel like they can be open about their whole authentic selves at work, they perform better, are more engaged, and experience a greater sense of well-being. Culturally aware. Communication styles differ across cultures, and you may want to consider how to adapt your approach, especially within a global company. Books like Cultural Dexterity by Andy Malinsky and The Culture Map by Erin Meyer offer helpful insights into how to shift your style. For example, you might be very direct in giving feedback, but if your colleague comes from a culture that prefers a less direct, softer approach, you want to adapt your style. Or you might be animated and emotionally expressive in giving feedback, but your employee comes from a culture where demonstrating visible emotional expression is frowned upon and makes them uncomfortable. While you don't have to change who you are, even small shifts can make a big difference. Be mindful about microaggressions, which are the everyday slights, indignities, put-downs, and insults that members of marginalized groups experience in their day-to-day interactions. If you're thinking, I wouldn't do that, note that most of us are unaware when we've engaged with somebody in an offensive or demeaning way. Examples include saying things like, which pronoun are you using these days? Or, can I just call you VJ? Vijayalakshmi is too long to say. Or even, I appreciate that even though you're religious, you're open-minded. Culture isn't just about country, of course. If your employee is new to the organization or new to you, they may not be used to a feedback culture. You may need to do some teaching about how feedback works around here. By putting feedback into the context, making it conversational, being clear and caring, and showing cultural awareness, you have a significant role in making even constructive feedback have a positive impact. Management expert Ken Blanchard once remarked, "Feedback is the breakfast of champions." And just like breakfast, feedback should be a regular part of your daily routine. And if we stop thinking about feedback as something that always needs to be planned and formal, we're actually more likely to give it. In addition, if we ask our direct reports ahead of time when and how they like to receive feedback, they're more likely to take it when we give it. So let's look at two options. Feedback can be 1, formal, at regular, predetermined times with pre-established performance goals, such as mid-year and year-end performance reviews, one-on-one meetings, goal-setting sessions at project meetings, etc. 2, informal, on a regular, ongoing basis as needed or as agreed upon. This is the opportunity to offer feedback in the moment. And since we know that timely feedback is critically important to helping people make behavior changes, we should be leveraging feedback moments as often as we can. Here are some times when you should think to yourself, aha, a feedback moment. When somebody asks you for your feedback, of course. When problems persist, when a client complains, when a client compliments, when you anticipate that a client may complain or compliment, when a client has a reason to complain or compliment, but doesn't actually do it, when errors occur repeatedly, when performance doesn't meet expectations, when someone's work habits impact yours, when you notice somebody doing something well and want to reinforce it, when you notice somebody has made a positive change based on prior feedback and you want to acknowledge it, when you think to yourself, I really don't want to deal with this. And when should you think twice about giving feedback? When you can't articulate a constructive reason for giving it. When you're feeling emotionally charged and are having trouble controlling your emotions. When you've observed something happen only once, unless it's the kind of behavior that shouldn't be tolerated at all, such as making a racist or homophobic remark. When you're looking for somebody to take the blame, when it's based on hearsay or gossip, when you can't clearly articulate your interpretation of a behavior, such as lazy, from the behavior itself, doesn't follow up with clients. When it's based on a stereotype, such as, well, you're very fluent for someone from China, rather than objective performance standards, such as, your sales are exceeding your target. When you haven't followed up on previous feedback conversations. When you've given lots of other feedback recently. There's only so many behavior changes that any of us can make at once. And whether the feedback is formal or informal, planned or in the moment, it can help to have a quick and easy model to frame your conversation. The Center for Creative Leadership's SBI feedback tool is one of the most widely used because it's both simple and effective. What does SBI stand for? situation, behavior, impact. Let's dig into each one of these in more detail. Situation. This is where you clearly outline the context of when and where you observe the behavior you're giving feedback on, so that your employee knows exactly what you're referring to. Behavior. Your next step is to describe the specific behavior or behaviors that you want to address rather than an interpretation of a behavior. A behavior is something that is observable, meaning you can hear or see it happen. Measurable, you can quantify its frequency. Repeatable, somebody else could copy it. For comparison, let's use the term confidence. Confidence is not a behavior. I can't observe confidence, I can't quantify how often confidence is happening, and I can't copy somebody else's confidence. Confidence is an interpretation of other behaviors, such as, for example, making direct eye contact when speaking, projecting your voice, asking for different points of view in meetings, etc. Those are all behaviors that are observable, measurable, and repeatable. This brings us to impact. Share the impact that the behavior had on you, the team, the client, the project, or even themselves and their own career trajectory. But don't use all of those. That is way too much impact. Pick the one that you think will resonate most with your employee. Here's an example of SBI in action. During yesterday's client meeting, when you were presenting the project update situation, you shared incorrect sales numbers for last quarter. Behavior. I now feel like I need to double check your presentations before you share them with the client. Impact. After that, you can make a collaborative plan about what to do differently in the future. And don't forget, you can use SBI for positive feedback too. Here's an example. During our project status meeting last week, situation, you offered to take writing the weekly project updates off Priya's plate. Behavior. This is the kind of generosity that makes your colleagues really appreciate you as a professional and as a team player. Impact. When it comes to giving feedback, it can be formal or informal. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment or the perfect conversation or even the perfect model. You can make almost any moment a feedback moment if you're committed to helping your employees grow and succeed. Regardless of whether you're a manager or an individual contributor, it's part of your job to solicit feedback from others. How else will you know what you should keep doing and what you should be doing differently? However, you might find that your colleagues are reluctant to give you the feedback you need to improve or even sustain what's working. Here are 5 common barriers you might face in getting helpful feedback from your direct report or colleagues and how to address them. Worrying about whether you're even open to feedback. Far too often, team members expect to be given downward feedback, but unless they're explicitly invited to offer upward feedback or peer feedback, they won't even know that that's on the table. What to do? Tell others that you're not only open to feedback, but that you want it and expect it. One way to frame it is to share that self-improvement is a personal and professional commitment that you've made to yourself, and ask for help meeting your goals. Ask, would you please help me keep the commitment I've made to myself? That way, your colleagues, your direct report, anyone can view their feedback as helping you make good on a promise. Apprehension about doing it right. Giving feedback adeptly is a skill that needs to be learned. And if they haven't learned how to do it well, maybe because they haven't had access to training or practice or role models, then they may resist doing it at all. What to do? Let your team member or manager or colleague know that feedback is a skill best learned through practice, a great development opportunity for yourself, and that you'd like to give them the opportunity to practice with you. Assure them that they don't have to do it right. They just have to show a willingness to try and to try to get better over time. Fear of retaliation. Let's face it, you may be in a position of power. You might have access to resources that are important to others, and they may worry that giving you feedback could interfere with their future opportunities. In addition, in some cultures, giving feedback up the hierarchy is simply not done. It would be seen as disrespectful and insubordinate. Be aware that these cultural norms can be a significant barrier. What to do? Address it head on. Try saying something like, I know it can feel uncomfortable to give feedback to somebody who has a say in what you work on or your career advancement. I've had the same concerns giving feedback to my boss or colleagues. Let me reassure you that I see your willingness to give me helpful feedback, even if it's negative, as one of your professional assets. Concern about hurting your feelings. You're only human, right? And feedback, especially when not delivered skillfully, can activate feelings of social rejection. Your direct report or colleague may be understandably worried about hurting you. What to do? Take the lead in giving yourself constructive feedback first, which could mitigate their fears. Say something like, I know that I tend to be slow and methodical in my work, often prioritizing accuracy over action. Others have shared with me that they find my style hard to work with, especially when they're facing a tight deadline. I need to get better at that. Would you share what you've experienced when working with me? And is there anything else I could be working to improve right now that would make your work or life easier? Suspicion that nothing will change as a result of the feedback. Giving feedback is hard, but giving feedback that doesn't result in anything changing is even harder. Soliciting feedback without addressing it or taking action on it rapidly erodes trust. What to do? Tell your colleague or direct report what you plan to do with the feedback they gave you. This might range from, I appreciate you telling me this, and I'm not sure I can address it right now, here's why, to, this is very helpful, and I'm going to take action to change this now. Here is my plan. And in both cases, keep actively, openly, and assertively inviting them to give you feedback. In the words of business executive Pamela Gill Alabaster, continuous learning leads to continuous improvement. Commit yourself to advancing your knowledge, skills, and expertise. Be a lifelong student. When it comes to giving and receiving negative feedback, most of us would rather have root canal. In fact, many of us are so uncomfortable with negative feedback that we'd rather not even call it negative feedback. We prefer to describe it as developmental feedback or constructive feedback, corrective feedback, etc. And we don't just bristle against what we call it, we chafe against the feedback itself. Nevertheless, any professional who is committed to getting better at their current job and to their career advancement down the road knows that negative feedback, when delivered appropriately, is critical to growth and improvement. However, far too often we fail to digest negative feedback because we're more committed to protecting ourselves and our egos against it. We'd rather be right than have something to learn. Do any of these behaviors sound like you when receiving negative feedback? Download the attached worksheet to help you identify how you behave when receiving feedback. Dread. I make up the worst possible story about the feedback I'm about to get. Discount. I minimize the importance of the feedback. Direct. I change the topic to something else or make the feedback about someone else. Denial. I don't consider what could be true even in a small way about this feedback. Dissect. I argue about every element of the feedback rather than focusing on the whole message. Depart. I walk out of the conversation. Distract. I talk about other accomplishments to minimize the impact of the feedback. Defy. I reject the credibility or authority of the person giving the feedback. Defend. I make excuses and or reject the content of the feedback. Distort. I turn small pieces of feedback into big deals or experience them as an attack on my character. Dramatize. I get highly emotional when receiving feedback. Disengage. I shut down emotionally and stop listening. Dwell. I ruminate about the feedback. If you recognize yourself in any of these behaviors, do the following. First, breathe. Maybe even more than once. Second, tell yourself that you are having a defensive reaction and that it's natural and normal. Third, ask yourself, what about this piece of feedback felt hard to hear? Is it because you already know it and haven't fixed it? Or maybe it felt threatening to your sense of status in the organization? Or maybe it didn't feel fair. Fourth, pick one of the following to do instead of behaving defensively. Recognize and shift your default perspective about feedback. If you think of feedback as something to be tolerated, recast your thinking to see feedback as something that will help you grow and succeed. See the feedback from the other person's perspective. You may think that having a few errors in an early draft of a report isn't such a big deal, but if your boss is managing 10 people, all of whom have errors in their reports, it can feel like an overwhelmingly big deal to them. Practice saying, "Tell me more." Your instinct may be to shut the conversation down as quickly as possible so that you don't have to hear more about what you're not doing right, but demonstrating your willingness to have the conversation and your curiosity to understand better about what you could be doing differently will go a long way. Don't catastrophize. It's a piece of feedback. It's probably not the end of your job and your career. And even if it is, you've got resources available to help you. Don't let your emotions hijack your rational thinking. Negative feedback may not feel great, but it can be a great way to know what you need more of or less of to be an even more valuable asset at work and to grow personally and professionally. American writer, professor, and social commentator Roxane Gay remarked, "I am totally down with disagreement. When it comes to asking for and receiving feedback, it can help to expect there to be some disagreement and be down with it. In other words, know how to deal with it constructively. After all, you and the person giving you the feedback are different people with different perspectives, different backgrounds, and even work from different vantage points in the organization. You can't possibly see everything the same way. So, what do you do if you get some feedback from your manager that you disagree with? Let's start with what not to do. First, don't completely dismiss or discount the feedback, saying something like, "That's just wrong," or "Absolutely not." Second, don't become combative, saying something like, "Where did you come up with that?" or "Are you kidding me?" Third, don't just give in or give up, saying something like, "Fine, whatever, you're right," or "Why should I even bother to make my case with you?" Now, let's talk about 5 helpful strategies of what you can do if you disagree with the feedback. Ask for specific examples and clarifications. Hopefully, your boss or colleague has already provided you with these. But if not, or if you get non-specific, not clear feedback like you're not being proactive enough, you're going to need to dig a bit. Make a request such as, "Can you share with me a specific example of when you think I could have been more proactive?" Or you can even say, "I want to make sure we're using the same language. What behaviors do you associate with being proactive?" And remember, tone matters a lot. Speak calmly, carefully, and with curiosity. Take your time and ask for a timeout if needed. If you're finding yourself experiencing some challenging emotions that feel hard to manage, or if you notice that you're having a tough time processing and responding, slow the process down. One way to do that is by looping, repeating back what you hear the other person say. It also serves to help the other person feel like you understand them. Another way to do that is to write things down, which, especially if you do it by hand, will give you time to reflect on the conversation as you slow it down to take notes. And still, another way is to ask for a timeout for you to think about what's being said and come back later or tomorrow to continue or finish the conversation. Find common ground. As much as you may find little merit in your manager's feedback, look for any areas of agreement, no matter how small. For example, if your boss gives you the feedback that you're not following up with prospects quickly enough, and you think you're doing it as fast as you possibly can, you can still agree that both of you want to convert prospects into paying clients. See if you can agree on the what and the why, even if you see the how differently. Apply a 2% true mindset. Ask yourself this: if I had to admit that 2% of the feedback were true, what 2% would it be? This gives you the opportunity to reflect on the overall feedback and look for parts of where it may be, just maybe, could be true for you. Let's say your boss says you rushed through that client pitch and you think you spoke at a reasonable pace. But perhaps you could admit that you were a little nervous, and once you do that, be willing to share that with your boss and start from there. Commit to a course of action and plan to revisit sooner rather than later. If after your conversation, your manager backs down because you helped them see it your way, hey, congratulations. And in the likely event that this doesn't happen, make a plan with your manager for you to try the new or different approach, but to check back in soon about how it's going. That way you won't spend months engaged in a new way of working without knowing whether or not it's making a positive difference. Hopefully, you get more feedback that you agree with than feedback you don't agree with. But when the time comes that the feedback makes you say, huh? You now have some strategies to tackle that conversation. Many of us have cried at work. Maybe we didn't get a promotion we expected, or we got a piece of hard feedback, or stress at home made us feel overwhelmed at work. And chances are you may have felt a little or a lot uncomfortable that you were visibly emotional at the workplace. And that is totally normal. So when we see someone else crying at work, we need to realize that yes, it's normal, and yes, they may be feeling uncomfortable or embarrassed too. And then, as a result, you may feel uncomfortable, guilty, or anxious. Why do we have that reaction? Well, there are several reasons which I highlighted in my June 2020 Harvard Business Review article, What to Say When Someone Cries at Work. Because we want to fix it. When we see someone crying, most of us have a natural instinct to want to problem solve. And we don't always know what the problem is that needs fixing because we worry that we caused it. We ask ourselves, was it something I said? Was it something I did? Did I make them cry? Because we don't know why they're crying. The simplest interpretation is that they're sad. But people also cry when they're angry, happy, embarrassed, anxious, relieved, scared, frustrated, understood, tired, appreciated, hungry, lonely, etc. Because we don't want to cry. Emotions are contagious, and we're concerned that somebody else's tears might trigger our own, especially if we are particularly empathetic. As you can see, helping someone who is crying at work takes emotional intelligence, especially self-awareness and self-management. Self-awareness requires that we recognize that somebody else's emotional expression is having an impact on us, and we're able to articulate what that is: fear, concern, anger. Self-management requires that we control our emotions in the moment and adapt to what's needed right now. So, what shouldn't you say? Things like, stop crying. This is unprofessional. Do you want other people to hear you? You're embarrassing yourself. You're being way too emotional. Well, now you're going to make me cry. None of those are helpful, supportive, or empathetic. What should you say instead? Try these 3 approaches. Let's pause for a moment here. I can see you're crying. Would you like to take a break or keep going? It's up to you. This is neutral language that gives someone the opportunity to choose what they want and need next. I'm going to stop our conversation for a second to check in with you. Can you tell me what's going on for you right now? This demonstrates compassion and curiosity for the person without dramatizing or overplaying your concern. You're crying, so let's pause. What would be most helpful for you right now? I'll follow your lead. This acknowledges what's happening while empowering the person to take control. Crying at work can be uncomfortable, but you can make it less awkward and more supportive by knowing just the right thing to say. Deciding whether or not to reveal a personal mental health issue at work is not an easy one. An employee may choose not to share due to their cultural norms, religious beliefs, sense of privacy, or other personal preferences. However, the barriers to talking about mental health aren't always personal. They're interpersonal. In the workshops I lead about talking about mental health at work, many employees share that they're worried about how their manager will react. They fear their manager won't have the mindsets and skills to handle the conversation well. Like what? Dismissing them. Oh, I'm sure you'll be fine. You're so strong. Blaming them. Can't you just put mind over matter? Minimizing them. Oh, please, who isn't depressed these days? Outing them. Yeah, I'm going to need to share this with a few other people so that we can figure out what to do. Holding them to a lower standard. If you're having such a tough time, maybe you shouldn't take the lead on such a big project. We need somebody we can count on. Threatening them, overtly or covertly. Taking time to deal with your personal stuff doesn't really make you look like your management material. Just something for you to keep in mind. Oversharing with them. Oh, my brother also had an alcohol problem. He's fine now, but it was really rough for him for a while. This one time, tiptoeing around them. Doesn't talking about being depressed make you even more depressed? I don't want to make things worse for you. Fearing them. You're not going to do something dumb if we have a bad day around here, right? Do I need to be worried about you? Dodging them. I really can't handle this right now. Is there somebody else that you could talk to about this? Anticipating any of these responses from a manager are likely to contribute to the stigma associated with mental illness. In contrast, when people feel like they can share their whole, authentic selves at work, including health and mental health concerns, they perform better, are more engaged, stay in their jobs longer, and experience overall well-being. So, what should you do to increase the chances that your colleagues will be open and honest with you? Here is how you can take a calmer approach that makes this potentially tricky conversation easier for both of you. C. Communicate clearly and compassionately that you are fully present and paying attention. I'm listening. You have my complete attention. A. Ask them to share what they're thinking and feeling. How are you feeling? What's weighing on you? L. Listen without judging, solving, prying, pushing, or pulling away. M. Make it easy for them to be open with you by saying, "Thank you for sharing this with me," and asking, "How can I best support you?" E. Explain what resources are available to them at work, such as an employee assistance program, insurance coverage, or workshops, and also ask what resources they have available to them outside of work. R. Revisit the conversation in a few days or weeks by checking in with them about how they're feeling and what else they might need. How you respond to a colleague who is sharing a mental health concern at work can make the difference between whether they feel embarrassed and stigmatized or acknowledged, safe, and included. We've all worked with that person. Which person? The negative one who complains about everything, from looming deadlines and long commute times to the carb-heavy snacks and the slow elevator. The one who sighs when you ask them to do something even slightly outside of their job description. The one who names everyone else as the reason when asked why something was late. The one with the sign on their desk that reads, "Your lack of preparation does not constitute my emergency." You know this person, right? We all do. This coworker can make it hard to work collaboratively, make it tricky to make requests, and can make it nearly impossible to share feedback. And it's that last element that can make this colleague so challenging to work with. One of the reasons that feedback can be so hard is that it's ineffective to tell someone that they're being negative. Why? Because being negative is an interpretation of behaviors, not a behavior itself. While you might see somebody as complaining and think of that as negative, your colleague might see it as sharing their honest experience. While you might see pessimism as negative, your coworker might view it as proactively considering positive negative outcomes. And while you might see their being demanding as negative, your office mate may regard it as holding a high bar. Telling somebody that they're being negative isn't just ineffective, it can actually make things worse. When we give people feedback about their personal character rather than about specific behaviors or tasks, we heighten the risk that they experience feelings of social rejection. And guess what won't make somebody less negative? Feeling rejected. So what can you do? Here are 3 strategies for working more positively with a negative person. Be understanding. Notice that I am not saying you need to have sympathy, meaning feeling what that person feels. I am choosing understanding because you may not feel what they feel, but you can probably understand that they maybe have issues going on in their work and life that you don't know about. Maybe they learned to behave this way for reasons that make sense to them and that have helped them along the way. Maybe they're not aware of their impact on others, especially if nobody has been brave enough to bring it up. Maybe they have some needs and values that aren't getting met. Maybe they're getting in their own way and, like all of us, have a blind spot about it. Maybe they want things to be different and they don't know how to go about it. Being understanding doesn't require you to communicate it directly to the other person, although go for it if you're up for it. It does require you to shift your mindset from, I don't know why anybody would act this way, to, I can see why somebody might act this way, even if you wouldn't. Take personal responsibility. It's highly likely you may not get this negative person to change their ways, so change yours. Take personal responsibility for how you might be contributing to their behavior, even in some small way, how you might be contributing to an environment that supports their behavior, talking to your boss and colleagues about helpful strategies rather than complaining about them behind their backs, recognizing if you're the person that other people come to air their grievances about them and therefore contributing to a culture of gossip and avoidance, creating your own happiness and positivity, setting and maintaining healthy boundaries with that person and others. Try a new approach. If you're watching this video, it's likely that what you're doing now to deal with a negative person may not be working. I suggest you run some short-term experiments to see if a different strategy provides some relief for you and for that negative person. For example, if you've been keeping things just business, try demonstrating interest in them personally. If you've been walking on eggshells, try being direct with your requests. If you've been judging them, try to see that they're expressing stress differently than you would and that their stress might be invisible to you. If you've been making the case that you're so different from them, discover areas of similarities. If you've been suppressing their impact on you, share with them honestly. If you're reluctant to give them more work, ask if there's anything you can do to be helpful. If you've been excluding them from social gatherings, invite them. If you've been avoiding them, offer them some positive feedback. If you've been frustrated by them, acknowledge their stress. If you've been only seeing them as negative, find out what they're positive about and reinforce it. While you may not be able to totally change a negative person into a positive one, you can change yourself into the kind of person who can bring positivity to a difficult working relationship. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "Freedom is not worth having if it does not include the freedom to make mistakes." As any seasoned business person knows, making blunders, having missteps, and being just plain wrong at times is just part of the journey to success. What else is a part of that occasionally bumpy path to profit? Having to endure hearing, "I told you so." Few phrases make people bristle as much as "I told you so." First of all, when we've gotten something wrong, we certainly don't want to be reminded of it. This can lead to feelings of shame, which, according to research, can make us feel exposed and vulnerable and can lead to anger. It's embarrassing and belittling, neither of which create healthy working relationships. Second of all, "I told you so" can be interpreted as a way of someone seeking credit for their intelligence or foresight, which is fine except when it's clearly at the expense of your project or your ego. Third, it's often an indirect or passive-aggressive way of somebody expressing hurt that you didn't listen to them in the first place, frustration that you ignored their counsel, or even anger that you picked a different approach despite their warnings. What makes hearing "I told you so" additionally irritating and unnecessary? Our hindsight bias, also known as the "knew it all along" effect, where after something has already happened, our natural inclination kicks in to see that event as having been predictable, whether or not we actually predicted it. In other words, we tell ourselves, "I told me so," without needing to hear that grating phrase from other people. Of course, there are many ways of responding to "I told you so," including genuine gratitude. "Thank you so much for trying to warn me." Vulnerable. "You had no way of knowing this, but hearing that makes me feel hurt and embarrassed." Direct. "I don't appreciate that." Challenging. "Yeah, and." Humorous. Said nobody who was really ever trying to be helpful. Deflecting. I think the research shows that this phrase is a serious conversation ender." Simply, ouch. Snarky. "Who do you think you are, my mother?" Redirecting. So as I was saying, corrective. "May I offer you some feedback on how you might approach me next time so that I'm more likely to take your advice?" Depending on the relationship you have with the other person, you might try one of those responses, but regardless of the relationship you have, this 2-word response should work in almost any situation. You did. It's just that simple. You're acknowledging the truth of the matter, that the other person warned you about something or gave you advice. It doesn't imply fault or personalize it or dramatize it or draw it out. It's a simple statement of fact. It's direct, non-defensive, clean, concise, and clear. And you can follow it with a thank you if you experience their "I told you so" as helpful. Or you can follow it with "and I wish I'd listened to you" if you wish you had. You can even use a humorous tone to turn it into a question. "Wait, you did?" Assuming there's trust in the relationship and you do it with a smile and the other person knows for sure that you're teasing. Whether you decide to respond in 2 simple words or in some other way, how you choose to react to one of the most maddening phrases can go a long way to demonstrating your professionalism, self-possession, and poise. "The art of leadership is saying no, not saying yes," remarked former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. "It is very easy to say yes." You don't have to be a leader to wrestle with saying no. Regardless of role, responsibility, title, or position, many of us find ourselves wanting to decline a request for our time, but we don't know how to say no assertively. And yes, you can say no to a request because a request is not a command. A request is an ask to which we can say yes, no, or make a counteroffer, while a command assumes an obligation. However, we often think of requests as commands, sometimes due to the tone in which the request is made, or a power differential, or our fear of the other person's reaction, or even feeling indebted to them. Nevertheless, while we all know that no is a complete sentence when it comes to responding to a request, we often wrestle with being too passive when we want to avoid conflict or hurt feelings, or too aggressive when we worry our needs will be ignored, or even passive-aggressive when we're feeling manipulated, punished, or otherwise concerned that an honest or direct approach won't work. A passive approach to saying no might sound like, all right, I'll do it this time, when we don't want to do it this time or at all. Or it can sound like, maybe I can, when you already know that you can't or don't want to say yes. An aggressive reaction to a request for our time might range from, are you kidding me? I said no, or not in a million years, or even, what makes you think I would want to do that? A passive-aggressive response can sound like, fine, when you're anything but. It can also sound like, do I really have a choice? It also shows up as, yeah, I'll get back to you, and you don't, or yeah, sure, I'll be there, and then you forget to show up. As much as we don't want to disappoint, hurt, or even anger our customers, clients, managers, direct reports, friends, or family, we can be assertive and firm in our no's while still being flexible enough to keep the door open for future yeses. This requires us to be clear and honest about our own needs and preferences, to do something else with our time and energy, while honoring the needs and preferences of others, to be heard, feel appreciated, stay connected, maintain their dignity in the face of rejection, and more. Here are 10 ways to say a no assertively to a request for your time, and you can download the attached worksheet to read these sample sentences yourself. Oh, I will be so disappointed to miss this. Thank you for asking me. I am so flattered that you ask, but unfortunately, I cannot do that. Can I help you brainstorm someone else who might be able to help? Normally, I would say yes, but I've already committed to something else. I need to decline, but I do hope you'll keep me in mind for the future. Would you please reach out to me again? I try very hard not to make commitments I will likely need to cancel, and because of the timing here, I can imagine needing to cancel at the last minute, leaving you in a last-minute scramble to find someone else. Because of that, I need to say no. I cannot attend in person, but I wonder if I can help in some other way. Can we brainstorm ideas? I can't make a decision right now, and I don't want to hold you up, so please feel free to ask someone else. Not at this time, but when's the next opportunity available for something like this? When do you need to know by? I ask because if it's in the next week or month or quarter, I'll need to say no. I'm not available, but I know someone who would love to be a part of it. May I connect you? Saying no can be hard, but saying yes when you really truly need to say no can be even harder in the long run. Thank you for participating in this course. Get better results from your conversations at work. I hope you feel more prepared to have relationship-building conversations, navigate conflict and tricky conversations, give and receive effective feedback, and even tackle personal conversations at work. Even though you have watched the videos and hopefully completed the worksheets and assessments, all of these skills take practice. That means in order to really master these conversations, you'll need to have actual real-life discussions with other human beings. Sometimes they will go better than you anticipated, and sometimes you'll need to try something different than you'd planned. Regardless, your commitment to making yourself a confident, engaged, and engaging conversationalist will help you grow in your relationships and in your career. And congratulations on being a lifelong learner. And there's more learning to come. For additional resources, please reach out to me so that you know how to access the direction and support you want or need. At the beginning of this course, you took a self-assessment to check your confidence in having productive conversations at work. It's time to check again. Take 1 minute for this quick self-assessment. You can download the written version of this assessment or just write down your answers somewhere where you can compare them to your beginning score. For each question, please rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 3, where 1 is, I don't feel confident, 2 is, I feel somewhat confident, and 3 is, I feel very confident. Foundations. I know how to make my tone of voice and body language enhance my communication style. I know how to make myself approachable. I am an excellent listener. Relationship building conversations. I can make small talk that helps others feel comfortable to talk about bigger issues. I can effectively deliver an elevator pitch in a variety of settings. I can listen attentively to other people without judgment or distraction. Navigating conflict and tricky conversations. I understand the difference between productive and unproductive conflict. I have helpful language to use to manage a range of conflicts. I tackle tricky conversations head on rather than avoiding them. Tackling feedback conversations. I am consistent in making feedback conversations constructive and productive. I accept constructive feedback without defensiveness. I know what to do if I get feedback I disagree with. When work conversations get personal. I know what to say and do when somebody cries at work. I can comfortably talk to people about mental health challenges at work. I can say no to a request for my time without feeling guilty. How did you do? If your score improved in one or more areas, congratulations. And if not, or not yet, don't worry. Just watch the videos again where you could use a little bit more direction, support, and practice. And I'm always here for you.